it is for you too. I want to talk about the Torah portion a little bit, but I have to begin with another reflection, and it's basically how my mother tricked me. It's true. My own mother tricked me. I thought that all of those lullabies that she would share with me, I thought they were lullabies, but she didn't. She sent me little Jewish messages every night before bed when I was a little boy. And my lullabies began with a melody that had the word Baruch Hu in it. And after that, the next melody that we sang, another lullaby, had the Shema in it. And the next lullaby had V'ahavta in it. And then Mi Chamocha, and then Aleinu. My mother's lullabies with me when I was a little boy was an evening service. Yes, she paved the way, or got into my head right from the very start, so I couldn't even make a serious consideration for law school or anything else. But looking back, even though she tricked me, I think there was something really significant about what she did and how she taught me, and then how, of course, I did the same with my daughters. Because by the time I was 5 or 6, I knew the whole service. All of these camp melodies, nifty youth group melodies, Debbie Friedman melodies, these were all moments of connection. My mother didn't teach me the rules about how to pray. She didn't teach me how to do things, in quotes, properly. I was under the covers in my bed, and I really thought these were lullabies. To my mom, this was an opportunity for her to build a connection with her son and help her son have a connection to her, and then to Judaism, and then to God. And as a young person, the first connection really with all of those prayers was to my mother. It's interesting because in this week's Torah portion, it begins, Ve'ata titzaveh et b'nei Yisrael, and usually it's translated as, you shall further instruct the Israelites. You see, God is communicating to Moses and Aaron about how everybody should be involved in certain kinds of rules, or how the priests need to take on certain kinds of responsibilities. But where it says, you shall further instruct, isn't such a literal translation. Where it says, Ve'ata titzaveh, you will instruct, is really about, you're going to help with all of these commandments. You are going to teach the commandments. You are going to command even. And the commandment, you would think, is going to be something about pursuing justice, or don't hurt the stranger, or somebody who's a little vulnerable. It actually is about how to bring the right kind of olive oil so folks in the tabernacle will be able to light the menorah properly. Every evening till morning, it should be a light. To kindle this light perpetually, or regularly, or consistently, that's what was being commanded. In the translation, again, it's very formal. You shall further instruct the Israelites. But if the idea of instruct could be interpreted for command, and the word titzaveh sounds a lot like mitzvah, it is the same root letters, then it's really about having these sense of obligations. And yeah, I understand the idea for them to light the lamp regularly, that ancient lamp that was in the tabernacle's vicinity. And for them, it was to light it regularly. For us, we translate it a little differently. The Hebrew is a ner tamid. You should light this ner regularly, tamid. We tend to translate a ner tamid as an eternal light, the light in the sanctuary that's always on. even in this time when we've been meeting here on Zoom, our Ner Tamid in the sanctuary has been on, a light, checking on it. Now I know the bulb will go out, or if there's a power outage, we'll have a problem. But this idea of it constantly being on is an idea that God is always going to be close. God is always going to be close to that space. God is always going to be close to our lives. But originally for the Torah, it was an item that wasn't always going to be lit. It had to be lit consistently. Folks had to approach it, fuel it, light it, and then clean up afterwards. God commanded the ritual, but nothing else. Doesn't really say why. But what it does is it teaches us to share our light. And since we were only lighting it back in those days at night, how to share our light in the midst of a darkness. It taught us how to create an atmosphere to be willing to let God into our lives. Maybe more than that, it was an idea that we have the power to bring light when it is dark, not just God, but normal folk like you and me. So I'm going to suggest to you that it's not just the ritual that's being commanded. And maybe the word is about being commanded, but I'm not sure if it's really all about the rules. I think it was about the encounter. And our ancient ancestors knew what it was like to have an encounter. The ritual was to have an impact on how we feel, not just that we get the results done. I know that there's some of us, many of us perhaps, that feel that ritual, that fancy word is empty, or just rules, or the mitzvot are these antiquated commandments, and I don't feel that way. And I know that Judaism is pretty legally based. It has a legal orientation. There's things you do and things that you don't do. And a lot of us grow up with a sense of doing Jewish the right way. And if it's not the right way, then it won't be meaningful. And I want to make a different suggestion. Can we transform our rituals into lullabies? Can we turn rules into lessons? Can we take our rituals and traditions and see that there's something more to it than just doing it right? There was a rabbi who died some years ago, a Reform rabbi, a very prominent Reform rabbi in Chicago. His name is Arnold Jacob Wolf. And he was a civil rights activist, and he was against the war in Vietnam, and he was in the newspaper a whole lot. But he was also a really smart thinker. And as a liberal, I don't mean politically, I mean religiously, as someone who recognized that the Torah and our texts are a dance between God and the people of Israel. As a religious liberal, he said our task is to ritualize the ethical commandments and to ethicize the ritual commandments. I'm going to say it again. Our task is to ritualize the ethical commandments and to ethicize the ritual commandments. It's his words that led me to share a thought myself, and I've shared it with you over and over and over again since I've been with Har HaShem. I believe that every meaningful ritual is going to have an ethical impulse. And I get to feel what is actually ethical and not just my opinion when it's rooted in tradition. So whether it's about prayer or the Passover Seder or even the silly Purim spiel last night, whatever it is, to be a real ritual in our generation, it has to be more than just a command from above. If it's a tender teaching, if it's a lullaby, if it helps us to open our hearts so whatever or whomever is resting just on top of the heart, when our heart opens, whatever that something is can enter. Rituals can help do that for us. So I know for Titzaveh, a lot of rabbis are going to be talking about the mitzvot, the sacred commandments. I'm going to pivot and say that I believe we have responsibilities. I believe we have obligations. But the way I understand them best, when they're shown to me as an ultimate truth, when they are shown to me as a tender teaching or as one of my mom's lullabies, that turns out weren't even hers, but it came from our rabbinic sources. How can we look at ritual a little bit differently? Can we embrace something and not do it in quotes perfectly? Does it have to be in a way that our Orthodox cousins do it? I don't think so. Whether it's visiting a mikveh or keeping kosher, redefining what it means to walk in this world Jewishly, I think we can be open to different possibilities inspired by our ancestors, but not necessarily the same way they did it. So let's try and find some lullabies, whatever that means to you, that we've experienced, and think about how do we bring it forward, because ultimately what Judaism is supposed to do, and what I believe the Holy One wants of us, is to be good and decent and caring and step forward and bounce forward, not back, forward, and make our journey sweet. Let's make that contagious. Aleinu l'shabbat.